Kia ora, tēnā koutou, everyone. It's our pleasure to begin the awards ceremony. I'm just going to be the housekeeper. If there's an emergency, we'll go out the back doors and stand outside on the edge of the street. Also, if you're an award winner, there is a blue mark for you to come here and stand on so that we can actually see your face this year. We noticed everyone last year when they came and got their awards. This is all we saw of them. We want to see your best side. So please come and face everyone as you're given your award. Department heads, if you're here, please come stand on the red mark because we would really like for you to be able to, yeah, it's not the danger mark, be able to actually hand your staff member the award. We feel it would be really wonderful to have your involvement in the ceremony along with Ralph and Barry this year. Are there any questions before we begin? All right, Ralph, over to you, please.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm sure many of you are familiar with a meeting of this sort where we really acknowledge our top performing teachers. These are people who've gone out of their way and have been rated very highly by their peers and by the students. And also this year we have people who've provided innovations into teaching and perhaps haven't themselves been at the coalface. These sort of awards are pretty common at every medical school all around the world, and there is a little bit of literature on them in the medical education literature. And people usually justify them by saying, well, it's one way of thanking our teachers, and it's also considered to be a way of engaging other teachers. I'm not sure that there's any evidence that that's true, but anyway, that's the theory behind it. So we'll be acknowledging our teachers, and you'll be hearing about each and every one of them, why they've got their award, and you'll be able to acknowledge them personally. But I actually want to talk about the other teachers who didn't get the award. About 5 weeks ago, we were all nervously facing the AMC, Australian Medical Accreditation Body, who was at our university. And I was kind of worried how our students would come across. Now, look, everyone knows that we produce really, really good graduates, and that's down to our teachers. But for the AMC visit, you actually have to show what you're doing to get there. And I was a bit worried that we wouldn't have all our teachers coming to the meetings, but they excelled themselves, and they blew the AMC accreditors away. The sort of words they used when describing them were collegial, enthusiastic, dedicated. I can't tell you exactly what the result of that is, but I'd be really, really disappointed if we didn't get a 10-year accreditation. I think we're going to do really, really well from it. So the question then comes up is, who contributes to that? Well, it's all the teachers who contribute to that. This year, I'm sure the All Blacks are going to be the world champions again. And there will also be a ceremony where the Players of the Year are awarded prizes. 2 or 3 people who did particularly good jobs. But you and I know that they didn't get to the position they are with 2 or 3 players. And so I want to acknowledge all the people who didn't get an award, but who really helped us in every other way, and including with the accreditation. So I'm going to stop now, and I don't have to do anything more. But I really would like you to acknowledge the other teachers, please.
E te whenua, tēnā koutou katoa, e mihi nui ki a koutou. I looked at the title, and there's been a lot of discussion about the title of today's session. And it's been very shall I just turn it off? Okay. Because these are teaching awards, but in fact, I thought they probably should be encouragement of learning awards rather than a teaching award. Because from my point of view, good teaching requires both curiosity and enthusiasm, and most students really respond to enthusiasm perhaps the most of anything. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed to me that curiosity and enthusiasm is not enough. And that in fact the key attribute of a good teacher is actually empathy and respect for students that enables the student to actually learn in an environment that encourages them to actually be a bit like the teacher. Like if you've got a good family, they will actually teach by example, and that example needs to respect the student and the environment which they're in, and demonstrate, I guess, respect for the patient. So without that, you will actually have, if you have a negative influence, in other words, you are bullying or disparaging of the student, you actually set up a negative environment that actually turns the student off, and that's the opposite to being a good teacher. So we're increasingly aware of those issues over the last 4 or 5 years. So I want to pay tribute to the people who actually respect and have empathy for students in this particular occasion. And I think the people that have been chosen and selected by the students, or a few by some others, actually demonstrate those particular attributes. Norera, tēnā koutou katoa. I wanted to pay tribute to the Prime Minister, who said she wished she was the first Prime Minister to be able to speak fluently in Te Reo, and I can't, so I'm in her vote. But also acknowledge the negative message that came that if you're a presenter on TV or on radio and you mispronounce Maori, you're likely to be dismissed from your job, which came up this week if you're listening to Morning Report. So yeah, I'm very nervous with using any Maori language, but I acknowledge it is Maori Language Week. Thank you. Okay, so we're not going to have a long session. We're hoping to be finishing fairly soon. So the first set of Dunedin Campus Awards are coming straight up. The Trainee Intern Award for Excellence in Teaching, Danielle Bly. Indeed, thank you. Oh, well done. Okay, going up the line, House Officer Award for Excellence in Teaching. The awardee is Dr. Richard McLeod. Good. Going again up the notch to Nursing Team Award for Excellence in Teaching, a particularly important one. The nursing team in this particular year is the Fracture Clinic nurses. Do we have a... Okay, well done, congratulations. Just to make up for last year's makeup.
Thank you.
Okay, Registrar Award for Excellence in Teaching, Dr. Jeremy Wong. Well done, very well done. Thank you. And finally, the Senior Medical Officer Award for Excellence in Teaching, Dr. Paul Trani. Always nice to give it to somebody in my own discipline. Thank you very much. Now that actually leads on to actually a guest presentation by the one Paul Trani. Thank you.
Am I on my mark? Can you hear me? Kia ora. I was asked to give some words about teaching, about what it means to me. And I considered it, and considered it, and considered it. And then I asked my wife, who's much smarter than me. And she, well, I wrote down my brainstorming. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. say thank you. That's her writing. So I'll try. Whakawhitai ki a koe. I hope I did that justice. I'm really quite honored to be here, to stand in front of you, to use 5 minutes of your time on a Wednesday afternoon to talk about something I absolutely adore. When I was in medical school and watching the lecturer parade back and forth in front of the podium, I thought to myself, I wanted to be there. I wanted to help. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be the person who sort of figured out how to do it. And when I moved here to New Zealand 5 years ago and I was informed that I was going to be teaching, I was really excited, and then I was informed I was going to be teaching behavioral developmental medicine, which is something I love and something I do and something I really had a hard time figuring out. How am I going to teach what's in my head? And I can't say I figured it out. I can't say I can give anybody any advice. But what I can give you is an anecdote that I think leads to a point that I'll make. I'm a geek, huge geek. I love it. I geek out in various ways. I won't go into the ins and outs of it, but I've been known to attend a convention, con, for those of you who are in the speak, a time or two. There's a specific convention that takes place in the United States around this time of the year, actually. It's the first weekend in September. It's called Dragon Con. Dragon Con is a convention that's known for one specific thing in America, cosplay, which some of you might recognize, but for those who don't recognize it, it's just an amalgamation of the words costume and play. Cosplay is very, very common at Dragon Con. In fact, it's basically the reason for Dragon Con. People are dressed as Star Wars characters and Starfleet officers from Star Trek and hobbits and dwarves and whatever is the movie of the moment that year. The very first year I went to Dragon Con was the year that 300, the movie, was out in the movie theaters that summer. And so in the lobbies of the Hilton, the Hyatt, the Ramada, and one other big H-named hotel in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, where Dragon Con takes place, you had 100 different guys running around dressed up like gladiators from 300, some of which shouldn't have been dressed up as gladiators from 300. You had all sorts of characters from any walk of life, mainstream geek-related movie. You had hobbits, you had dwarves, you had ents, guys on stilts walking around the lobby as trees. It's a 4-day convention. I was there for all 4 days. After 4 days, 3 days really, at the convention, I was inured to costume. I didn't see it anymore. I couldn't see it. The people that I see walking around dressed up as armored knights was just from room 405 down the way. The person dressed up as, a fuzzy Ewok was my friend Larry. Didn't see it. You also got a lot of sleep, so that might have had something to do with what would happen next. I was down in sub-basement 2 of Hyatt Central doing something geeky. I finished up my session. I get into an elevator. I'm going to go up to my hotel room, maybe freshen up. I haven't taken a shower in 2 days, so who am I kidding? And then come back down to the lobby and see what else is going on. I get into the elevator. Elevator goes up 1 floor. Onto the elevator comes older guy, kind of overweight, salt and pepper beard, loud sweater, flanked by 2 guys with dark sunglasses, dark suits, 1 white, 1 black. I'm no slouch. I said, Men in Black. Oh, that's a good costume. I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, oh, that's a good costume. Doors close. Elevator starts up. And then I have a brain flash. I'm like, oh, of course. So I tapped the guy in the loud sweater on the shoulder, and I said, hey, man, great George Lucas costume. He doesn't even turn around. And from around his neck goes like this. And shows me his badge, which announces that it is George Lucas I just touched. The elevator opens, ding. George Lucas gets off. His two bodyguards get off. And one of them goes like this. Elevator door closes. I use that still to this day to remind me to not lose the forest for the ents, to not lose the forest for the trees in something that you love doing. I love teaching. I don't want it only to be in an environment like this. I don't want it to be only in an environment where I'm sitting or standing in front of a crowd of rapt people who have to be or their phones or their laptops or asleep. I want to teach all the time. And that sometimes leads me to very award rounds or clinics that are chronically running 15 to 20 minutes behind because I can't stop talking about this really interesting thing, but I think it's really interesting. And maybe the student I'm with or the person who's shadowing me finds it interesting, but I'd like to think that in some way, passing on my love for this field that I participate in is part of my responsibility. So much in the same way that George Lucas did not engage with me, I want to engage and not lose the forest for the trees when it comes to teaching. And so I mean, if I were to give you any advice whatsoever, I would say just don't lose the opportunities that are right there in the moment. And the next time you see George Lucas in the wild, ask him, why, Jar Jar, why? Why, Jar Jar, why? I will say there is a postscript to this somewhat long story. If you don't believe my story, there is evidence. 3 months after DragonCon, I was phoned by a friend of mine and said, Paul, you're on television. A friend of mine who was at DragonCon with me. Paul, you're on television. I'm like, I'm not on television. He's like, no, Robot Chicken put you on television. Robot Chicken, for those of you who may or may not be aware, is an Adult Swim cartoon show where they basically take action figures or claymation and they make fun of pop culture things. They did a Star Wars episode around Christmas time in 2007. There is a George Lucas convention-related sketch where someone who is bald and has dark framed glasses comes up to him and thinks he is not George Lucas at this convention and tries to make fun of him. George Lucas was on the writing staff for that particular Robot Chicken episode. I'm in George Lucas's head. That's my story. Thank you.
So we have online from our campus in Invercargill, hopefully, our Associate Dean down there. And
no, he's not here yet.
Not there?
No, he's not here, just a registrar in a house opposite.
Okay, so welcome to the Teaching Awards for ALM at the Dunedin School of Medicine, and which you're obviously part of. So in the absence of our Associate Dean down there, I would go straight to the Invercargill Awards. The House Officer Award for Excellence in Teaching, Invercargill Campus, Dr. Aidan Smith.
Thank you very much.
Aidan, do you want to say anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Hi to everyone down up there in Dunedin. I just want to say really thankful for this award, really grateful. I've really enjoyed meeting a lot of the students coming down here for the interprofessional exchange days, trying out some new techniques with getting our students together with different disciplines before they hit clinical placements, well, during their clinical placements, and just getting to know everyone who's spending time with us. It's been a real privilege, and I enjoy it every time I get to teach students down here. So thank you very much once again, and I hope you guys continue to enjoy your time in medical school and coming down to Invercargill.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to the Registrar Award for Excellence in Teaching for the Invercargill campus, and that's Dr. Andrew Moore. Great picture there. You see there? Andrew, are you there?
Yes, we just got cut off. We'll be back.
So is he there? Hi, Andrew.
Hey.
Do you want to say a word or two?
No, just thank you. I'll go nice and short in case it gets cut off again.
Okay, great. Thank you for your work. And finally, the Senior Medical Officer Award for Excellence in Teaching for the Invercargill campus is Dr. MB Chatterjee, and I don't think he's down there. So we'll acknowledge it, and he'll get his certificate sent in the post. So that takes us to the student reps, Ben Hotzen and Sashika, who are here to come round for a second guest presentation. That's all right.
Hello. Okay, cool. So we've been asked to discuss briefly from the student's voice on our perspective for what makes a great teacher. I'd like to share my anecdote. So I'd like to share an experience with a consultant who I would consider an inspirational teacher to me and one of my role models. This consultant to me epitomized empathy. He was able to break down the power distances with his patients and walk beside them through their journeys. He was able to flatten the historical hierarchy among his students and included them within the discussion with the patient. I remember fondly that between each outpatient, he would whip out his whiteboard marker, scribble on the whiteboard, and discuss the care of that patient. I felt like his colleague, as we would challenge each other's knowledge, and importantly, he sought deficits in my own knowledge base for us to discuss on. This drove me to not just read up about the core knowledge, but delve into the literature, which meant our discussions elevated to discussing clinical management in reference to the current literature. I do not believe this experience is unique to myself or exclusive to a consultant, but also house officers, TIs, nurses, and many more. I believe we all have had role models like this along our journeys that have challenged us to do more and inspired us to become who we are today. It is important to recognize these great teachers as they are not represented by hospital key performance indicators like the number of patients seen or surgeries carried out, but by their impact in shaping future doctors in the years ahead.
Koto. I'm Sashika, I'm a fourth year medical student, and also I'm the UMSA education rep for this year. So in my role, I've started to realise how important education is for all of the students here at medical school. And I've started to realise how we're taught in a huge variety of ways, so not just in a tutorial setting, but also, especially in ALM, you're taught when you are walking between patients, when you are in the, walking in the corridors, or if you're waiting for your coffee. These are all opportunities where you get taught. So it's quite important to engage with students in sort of any opportunity that you can get. So it's hugely important to recognise how the good teachers, and we need to realise what a positive impact this has on students, because not only do we learn a lot from these people, but we also make quite a lot of career choices based on these teachers as well, and because it has such a big impact on what we think about a particular specialty. So with that in mind, Ben and I quickly just came up with sort of a very non-exhaustive list of what makes a good teacher. So someone who listens, someone who's passionate, but I guess that comes out just naturally. Someone who's engaging and inclusive, someone who has very clear key messages that they want you to take away, someone who figures out what are the gaps they need to fill, therefore just talking about it in general, and someone who knows how to pitch the information in the right level. So since the influence of teachers extends beyond the classroom well into the future, we sincerely want to thank every one of you for being such great teachers, including the ones that didn't get awards today. So thank you, ngā mihi.
So we now move to departmental awards, and as they come up, the heads of departments would come and make a statement about the awards and why they've given the award, and then I'll give the award. So I'm not sure that actually all the heads of departments are here. So Bioethics Centre. Oh, yes, we have. So do you want to announce it, and then I'll give it?
The bioethics ALM teacher goes to Dr. Simon Walker. Now, the reason why Simon got the award this year is because of his dedication to teaching and engaging with students and working alongside clinical staff to really perfect his teaching and to provide the very best of environments for student learning. So thank you very much, Simon.
Well done. This is it. Department of General Practice. I don't think Tim is here. So I'll go straight forward to the award from General Practice. So the award goes to Dr. Kristen Kenrick, and the statement that goes with this is that she's a senior lecturer in general practice, is the module convener for 4th year, and co-convener for the 6th year trainee intern attachment. She's highly rated by her peers and students, the quality of her teaching, and also for the leadership that she shows in the department's undergraduate teaching program. Well done. We used to be neighbours, but that's got nothing to do with this. Okay, so next is the Department of Medicine. And Michael Schultz is coming down, and we'll make that award. What happened to the mic? Nope, it disappeared. Sorry, okay.
Thank you. I don't think Graham is he's probably teaching students. So who knows Graham Hammond-Took? We could say this is a lifetime award because Graham has been with us for about 30 years now, and he's been heavily involved in teaching for 30 years. So I wasn't here 30 years ago, so I don't know how you guys taught 30 years ago. Graham would tell us that it was a big mess and it needed improvement. It needed constant improvement. I think that's one of the reasons why we choose Graham to receive the award, because he stepped on and he kept going with the teaching. He innovated the teaching constantly in the area of neurology, and he's still a fantastic teacher, and he's still loved by his students. He's still loved by his peers, and that's why the Department of Medicine decided that Graham Hammond-Took should get our departmental award. Thank you, Graham. He was standing on that.
So, Hamish was going to accept it on. Are you good?
There we go.
Okay, come and shake my hand, Hamish. Okay, well done, Graham. The Department of Preventive and Social Medicine. And Trish, good. We've now got the weapons, and we've got the microphone.
Does it matter? Ah, look at that.
Susan Jack is a public health medicine specialist who's been convening the ALM public health attachment for several years now, and has really taken it in hand and reshaped it and introduced a number of innovations, including a global health classroom, which involves the students linking in with students in the medical school in Samoa to learn from each other, and several other innovations which have really been very well received by students, and Susan's student evaluations are amongst the best we've ever seen in this attachment and getting better. So it's fantastic to have her on board and doing such good work.
Well done, really good. Okay. Department of Psychological Medicine. It's Katie. Kate's here, good. Great. And what happens to the microphone? Microphone's on. And that's well done. Thank you. Great. Sorry, no, I didn't do the process right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Department of Surgical Sciences. And is Mark here? In which case shall I announce and go? The Surgical Sciences Departmental Teaching Awards is the person who's been a long time convener involvement in it, Mr. Andrew Bordeaux. Nice picture. Is he here? Probably not. Okay, so we'll be passing that on to him. And Department of Women and Children's Health. Hartley. Okay. One.
I'm happy to present this award to Xiaomin Liang, who's one of our ONG registrars. Many of you may not have encountered her because she's only been here for a few months' time. And what's incredibly remarkable, she hasn't had a lot of formal teaching opportunities within our courses as far as tutorials. Her teaching is mostly in the clinical arena and with trainee interns. At the end of every trainee intern run, we ask the students to remark, who was the top teacher that influenced your learning? And since she has come here, she's the only one that's really mentioned, which is really incredibly remarkable. And I suspect that while she's here, no one else is going to win any teaching awards. And she does that just by making them feel like such a part of a team and seeking out and paving the way for them to have learning opportunities in the clinical setting and taking the time. An ONG registrar, there aren't many people in the hospital who are busier than they are. So to be able to make the environment that the students feel like they're being given significant portion of her time is very, very remarkable. And I think it's outstanding and, certainly a deserving recipient of this award.
That was really well done. Thank you. Yeah. So that is the our eight department awards, and thank you very much for all those. We're now having a guest presentation from the clinical skills team, Ohad and John. And the other one can use that. That's all right.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for asking me to say some kind and wise things about Paul for this award. You'll probably get 50% of that. So we'll see how we get on. And I've got to start by chastising the other Paul for asking his better half as to where to start a speech or a talk. I mean, I did what any self-respecting academic would do, and that heads straight for Wikipedia. And there's a few things I didn't know about Madeiros. First of all, it originates from northern Portugal, known worldwide. Knights named Madeiros participated in ending the Moorish subjugation of Iberia, as well as fighting the Spanish in order to maintain Portugal's sovereignty. And the Madeiros heraldry and coat of arms is genuine and well known. So Paul clearly has some very important and regal genes to carry on into the work he does for us now. The other thing some of you may well know about Paul, he's a very keen fan of Star Trek. So he's a Trekker. I'm not a Trekkie, I was chastised. Apparently they're not Trekkies, they're Trekkers. And I was thinking about how I was going to link this in to say a few words about Paul. And I thought, which character in the series sort of most befits Paul? And there can only be one. It's got to be Spock. There's a couple of reasons for that. Clearly, the love of mustard-coloured jumpers is high on the list. But there's a few other parallels which I think are quite important as well. Spock is half human, half Vulcan, and that paradox was quite difficult for him, so I'm led to believe. And Paul has a paradox of working half for the DSM and half for the DHB. And that is a job which is clearly very, very difficult. It's a balance which is difficult to strike. He's got 2 masters in the skills lab. And it's a work he does exceptionally well. He knows he does work with the PD, he works with Mel and the SDHB team to make sure we give a good service to the ADHB, whilst also working with the Dean's Department and the School of Medicine to make sure the students get as good a deal as possible. Now, this is difficult because the skills lab is in greater than 100% demand. And Paul negotiates and navigates that with great aplomb. The other thing, of course, Spock has is the console in the Starship Enterprise. And you've seen that photo of Paul already with his computers and his Excel spreadsheets. And I think this is something which is worth commenting on, certainly for the junior doctors and medical students amongst you. The need for clinical governance and clinical audit is paramount. But what is most important in that is you owning your data. If you own the data and you ask the questions and you can get the information you need for the best care of your student, for best care of your patient, exactly the same parallel in teaching. You need to audit teaching. You need to understand what you're doing in teaching. And as part of that, therefore, you need to own the data. And Paul does that with multiple screens and many, many spreadsheets and can tell us exactly what's going on in the skills lab, what the call on resources are, and where we need to add extra resources and extra support. Clearly, Spock has got Captain Kirk and Paul has got OHAD. And Spock's role is to let Captain Kirk do his job. And there's no question that Paul allows OHAD and myself to run the teaching side of things, and he does the work. A bit like, you know, the old idea of a duck just moving on serenely on the surface. OHAD and I are the serene surface people. Paul is a fellow who's doing all the work underneath and making these things happen, making sure that the, for example, the resus courses have got the kit required so they're ready to go first thing in the morning. I think it's really important to remember how much work goes into setting up simulations and putting them away, setting up the days in the skills lab. And Paul does all that with a smile. Spock, unflappable, logical, intelligent, had pointy ears. Well, I'll accept that Paul is unflappable, logic, moderately intelligent, and I'm not going to comment on the ears. The only one thing I would say, of course, is that he supports Norwich FC, which Spock would say was illogical, undoubtedly. So, Paul, can I just get you to come down and receive this award? I'll leave you with this quote. I'll let you guess which of the two it was about.
Well done. Okay. Great award. Oh, if I'm allowed an anecdote, the last award was actually essential in my book as a result of the accreditation visit, where I somewhat nervously, they said, well, I was nervous when they said, we want to go to the schools lab. And so I went over with them. And I was astounded about the sort of spaceship-like efficiency, just to use the right analogy, that the whole I guess, area was running, and that contrasted really quite markedly with 2 or 3 years ago when I took over the school. So, well done. We have 2 further special awards. One is actually a Regional Centre Teaching Award, and I do have something to read out. The person receiving this award is Kirsty Murrell McMillan, and she is a rural nurse specialist and professional practice fellow based in Otago, and is involved with our 4th and 5th year program. She was instrumental in setting up the Invercargill as a 4th year urban GP module centre, and since then has done and contributed an enormous amount of work with GPs in that local Invercargill area, and delivered a significant sort of chunk of the tutorial teaching for the catchment in general practice down there. She has them over to her home for a meal. She arranges various outings for them, such as whitebaiting and flounder fishing with her husband. She encourages the GPs to include students in their peer groups and other similar events, and was recently acknowledged by the GP community for what they see as her part in the increasing number of new GPs coming to Invercargill. So she well deserves this award as our Regional Centre Teaching Award. Well done. Thank you. All right. Now, our last award is going to be introduced by Michael Schultz. Is that right? No? Okay. Yes, I thought you were. Yep. Okay. So, very last, we're just about to finish. There's refreshments outside. So, the last award of the evening is to Dr. Steve Johnson for innovation in teaching.
Yes. Thank you very much, Barry. Yes, thank you very much, Barry, for asking me to present this last award on innovation and teaching to my colleague, Steve Johnson. So some of you might say, well, he's just handing out the award to his buddies because he's also a gastroenterologist and I happen to be one as well. But that's actually not the case. Steve came to us as a senior lecturer a couple of years ago, and he's one of those senior lecturers where you definitely need a person who kind of makes the other half of you in your gastroenterology department. I was on my own for a while, and the teaching in gastro is a lot. So we needed another teacher, but how to find another senior lecturer with publications and everything like that. So I talked to Barry, and Barry gladly agreed with me that we need somebody who can actually focus on teaching. We do a lot of research in gastroenterology already and in the Department of Medicine as such, but we need somebody who is really passionate about teaching. So Steve came along and said, well, you know, I don't really have much in terms of research to show you. I don't have many publications, but what I'm really passionate about is teaching. So Steve was appointed. He also then enrolled into a Master's of Medical Education. And with that combination of being passionate and having a course that gives him the theoretical knowledge in teaching, this was just a fantastic combination. And Steve has taken on board the teaching in the Department of Medicine by its horns, and it's not just the Longhorns from Texas. It's really literally taken it on by its horns, and he's done so many things that I didn't think are part of teaching. We now do a quiz show. We do almost something like a roving reporter in the Barnett Lecture Theatre and go around with the microphone and ask students to answer questions. We don't have just students, as some of my predecessors here said, that look in their phone or look in their a laptop or even fall asleep. With Steve in the room, that doesn't happen because they're all just on the spot. They have their cell phone in their hands, but to answer questions, to bring questions up to the screen, it's been just absolutely fantastic. And I think what it was a little bit of a dusty teaching that we had in gastroenterology is now, for me, as a head of Department of Medicine, an absolutely shining example how teaching should be done. So thank you, Steve, for all your enthusiasm and your innovation in teaching. I'm going to hand it over.
Well done. It's great. Wonderful. Cheers. So thank you very much for attending. The time is up. Refreshments are in the foyer. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, katoa.